On approach to Cincinnati, Ohio, the pilots of Air Tahoma Flight 185 faced disaster.
2,300 feet.
Keep it steady.
The airplane will fall like a rock. My God.
The plane crashes into a golf course. Only the captain survives.
He did not remember much of the flight. When you have a tragic event happen, the memories are not there.
The wrecked engines provide investigators with their first clue.
There's no evidence of burning or charring. Both engines flamed out before the crash.
But according to the gauges, there was ample fuel for the flight.
If there was still 5,600 pounds of fuel in the right tank, why didn't that fuel feed the engines?
That was certainly something that I had not seen before.
Air Tahoma Flight 185 is cruising at 15,000 feet. It's headed for Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport.
Coffee's still hot if you want some.
No, thanks. I'm well rested.
Captain Bruno Picelli is an experienced pilot who has flown all over the world and also worked as a firefighter in British Columbia, Canada. Convair 580 pilot Bruno Saint-Jacques has flown alongside Captain Picelli.
He was a very good person, easy to get along with. He flew well. Me and him was a very good joint venture.
Michael Gelwicks has logged nearly 2,500 hours as a pilot and flight engineer and is now a first officer for Air Tahoma. Tonight's flight from Memphis, Tennessee to Cincinnati, Ohio is 80 minutes.
This was the first leg of a round trip and was done every weeknight by Air Tahoma.
They're flying a Convair 580, a twin turboprop aircraft used for short-haul flights.
The Convair 580 is about 50 years old, was used in passenger service for a long time, and then transitioned to cargo service. It was always reputed to be a very stable, reliable airplane.
So what was it like flying as a firefighter?
Well, long hours. Same plane as this, different cargo, of course.
There are 5 pallets containing mail and parcels from the courier DHL Express on board the aircraft.
How's the paperwork?
Almost done.
The captain was focused on some paperwork that he needed to complete before he landed in Cincinnati, which he did.
Okay. You know what? I'm just gonna balance out the fuel here.
Captain Picelli notices that one of his fuel tanks has more fuel than the other.
The Convair 580 has 2 tanks, and you can use one tank to feed both engines until both tanks are even.
1 hour into the flight, the crew receives a weather update.
Tahoma 185? Winds are kind of weird today. Suggest 10 left to Cincinnati when able.
Okay, 10 degrees left to Cincinnati when able. 185, thank you.
Already had it. Right on the money.
As Air Tahoma 185 begins its descent, the first officer detects a change in the controls.
Yoke feels funny.
Say again?
Feels like I need a lot of force. It's pushing to the right for some reason. I don't know why.
The conveyor doesn't use hydraulic to move the control surfaces. The pilot must use a lot of arm strength when the autopilot is not on.
Oh. 4 in the box.
30 miles from the airport, the controller provides an update on the approach.
Tacoma 185, fly heading 090, maintain 4,000.
Maintain 4,000, 185. They're packed tonight, so we're gonna go bang, bang, bang.
Got it.
There was pressure on it because if you get late in the sequence of the other aircraft landing in the airport, you're slowing down all the airplane behind you.
Tacoma 185, cleared for visual approach, 36 right, keep your speed up.
Visual approach. 36 right. Keep the speed up. 185, thank you.
As the crew receives clearance for a visual approach, the aircraft continues pulling to the right.
What in the world is going on with this plane? Sucker's acting so funny.
We'll do a full control check on the ground. Point it down at 3,000 as quick as you can.
Usually an airplane flies straight and wings level. It wouldn't give you a nice feeling to fly the plane which always want to turn on one side.
185, runway 36 right, clear to land.
Clear to land, 36 right, 185.
Runway's in sight.
All right, I'll give you the in-range. In-range check. Cabin pressure.
Set.
Bypasses down. Hydraulic pressure. Quantity checks.
As the crew runs the in-range checklist,
AC pump is on, green light. Boost pump's on.
the plane continues to handle poorly.
Man, I'm telling you, what is wrong with this plane? It is really funny.
Then, less than 5 miles from the airport, and just 2,300 feet above the ground, both engines lose power.
The airplane will fall like a rock because it needs at least one engine in good shape to bring them to the runway. 2,300 feet. My God.
Cincinnati Control, Tacoma 185.
We're having engine problems.
Tacoma 185, do you require emergency support?
Negative.
I think the reason he said no was he was still hoping that somehow he could get to the airport.
Keep it steady.
But they're dropping too fast to make it to the airport.
Come on.
They see an opening ahead.
There's no time at all to raise the gear, raise the flap, restart the engine before you touch the ground. Their only option was to go straight to the safest place to put down the plane and hope for the best.
Tacoma 185, please respond.
They were at low altitude.
Hold it up.
They were short of the runway. It was dark outside.
Tacoma 185, do you copy?
The situation was very, very dire.
Trees!
They make it through the trees.
Come on! Come on!
But can't keep the plane on the ground. Emergency vehicles soon arrive at the crash site, just 1.2 miles south of Cincinnati's International Airport. The body of First Officer Gelwicks is found in the wreckage. Incredibly, Captain Picelli has survived. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, rush to Cincinnati and begin looking into the crash of Air Tahoma Flight 185.
So, what have we got so far?
Both black boxes have been sent to Washington for analysis.
Good. Structural failure?
Take a look.
When we first arrived, what we typically do is to look for the four corners of the airplane to be able to rule out some sort of structural failure or a part or piece of the airplane departing prior to impact with the ground.
We found all four corners of the plane. We found the tail here. We located both wingtips here, and the nose was essentially split in half and fractured into small pieces.
If it wasn't structural failure, then what? What did the captain have to say?
He's still recovering in hospital. But I did speak with the air traffic controller.
And?
She says the crew reported having engine problems just before crashing.
When we heard that the crew had reported engine problems, it made us think as investigators whether it was one engine or two engines. And that would be a big difference. With one engine, they would still be able to make the airfield.
Tahoma 185, we're having engine problems.
If the engines were operating before the crash, investigators expect to find burnt debris inside the engine.
There's no evidence of burning or charring. I don't think we had combustion on this engine.
Ditto with engine 2.
So both engines flamed out before the crash.
With a dual engine failure, that's not common. So we would think immediately about something with the fuel, either the loss of fuel or maybe even contamination within the fuel.
Was the fuel on board Flight 185 contaminated?
Fuel contamination is a danger to flight safety because it can affect both engines at the same time.
Do we have the results of that fuel testing?
Yeah, right here. Fuel checks out.
Well, maybe they ran out of fuel?
Well, it's possible.
In 1978, pilots of United Airlines Flight 173 ran out of fuel while troubleshooting a landing gear issue. The DC-8 crashed into a neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. 10 of the 189 people on board were killed.
To explore the possibility of whether the airplane ran out of fuel, we wanted to look initially at the fuel quantity indicators in the flight deck.
Investigators recover Flight 185's instrument panel. They focus on the left and right fuel tank indicators.
0 and 5,600 pounds. That's odd.
The expectation would be that both would be approximately the same value. That one was at 0 wasn't surprising, I suppose, but the other one being so much different was certainly something that I had not seen before.
Okay, so they didn't exactly run out of fuel, but why are the tanks so uneven?
Maybe some kind of problem in the fuel system stopped fuel from flowing to the engines.
See what you can salvage in terms of fuel pumps and piping from the wreckage? We'll have a look.
While looking at all the different elements of the fuel system, the hope was that you would be able to document something going wrong, either loss of fuel or fuel starvation.
Investigators slowly piece together elements of the plane's fuel system.
So these are the cross-feed pipe and valves?
Check it out.
The cross-feed valves allow the pilot to provide both engines with fuel from only one tank when there's a fuel imbalance.
Both valves are open. That means they were cross-feeding fuel before the crash.
When we found that the cross-feed valves were open, that was a huge discovery. We wondered if that may have some sort of connection between the left tank having no fuel and the right tank having excessive fuel.
But why would the crew be cross-feeding fuel so close to landing? Did they make a mistake?
Only one person knows. Let's see if the captain can talk to us yet.
The good thing in this accident was that the captain did survive. He was able to talk with us in the hospital because he only had minor injuries.
How are you feeling?
Okay, thanks.
Can you tell me what you remember of the flight? Every detail counts.
What is wrong with this plane? It is really funny.
I remember...
Visual approach, 36 right, keep the speed up, 185.
I remember talking on the radio.
To Homer 185, cleared for visual approach. Keep your speed up.
Saw the approach lights. Then we weren't getting power. Then the next thing I remember is the impact.
Keep it steady. Keep it steady, steady.
And then I was standing outside.
One more thing. We found the cross-feed valves open. Do you remember cross-feeding fuel during the flight?
I'm sorry, I don't.
He did not remember much of the flight because when you have a tragic event happen, the memories are not there.
Investigators searched the wreckage for clues that could explain why the two cross-feed valves were open.
It's the weight and balance form for the flight.
The weight and balance form reflects where the cargo pallets are located, whether they're towards the front of the airplane or towards the back of the airplane, and that determines whether the airplane is nose heavy or tail heavy or right where it should be in the middle.
That's strange. Looks like the captain was revising his calculations, possibly during the flight.
Well, this is stranger. Here's a second one.
This one has no corrections, and the captain signed it.
Finding two weight and balance sheets for the same flight with different data on it at the accident site raised lots of questions for us. What was the captain doing during the flight?
So it looks like the captain was revising his numbers on this first form, almost using it like a working copy. Then this was his hard copy to hand in.
Did the captain's weight and balance calculations play a role in the crash?
Well, the center of gravity limits were within the envelope.
All right, so a mistake in his weight and balance calculations didn't bring down the plane.
Well, whatever his process, he was supposed to hand this in before departure.
Check with the airline. See if the captain handed in his numbers before takeoff.
Taking off without having computed the weight and balance limits is against procedures. It cuts the safety margin.
You're sure? Okay, thanks. The airline just confirmed the plane departed without the captain leaving a weight and balance form behind in Memphis.
So, why did our captain depart before completing his paperwork? Is your coffee?
Fine, thanks.
Investigators re-interview Captain Bruno Picelli to find out why he didn't follow proper procedure before Flight 185's departure.
So, found some weight and balance forms in the wreckage. Why didn't you complete them before taking off?
What can I say? I ran out of time. Normally, I fill out the form using their handheld computer. It had been acting up. Now, it was just dead. I'm not used to filling out that form manually. Frankly, I've never been trained to. So, I thought I'd finish it en route.
Captain Picelli explains how he determined that Flight 185 was safe to take off.
I did my own assessment. I checked that the plane's maximum weight was acceptable. I saw that the position of the cargo pallets were evenly balanced. I also looked at the nose landing gear strut, and the plane sat properly on it.
If the nose wheel strut was compressed, that would be nose heavy, and if it were extended, it would be tail heavy, but it was in a normal position. So on that basis, he decided that the airplane was actually within its weight and balance limits.
From your corrections, it looks like your numbers weren't adding up.
That's true. Yeah, at first, they didn't. So I had to keep working on them. Yeah, it took me a while to get them right.
How long did it take?
I don't know.
Did it interfere with your workflow?
It was stressful. I mean, I was buried in paperwork.
Right.
So even though the weight and balance was not an issue with the operation of the engines, it did raise questions with regard to the crew activity.
Hey, any news?
With no explanation for the cause of Flight 185's engine failure, the investigation finally gets a break.
Great. Send it to us right away. The lab just finished transcribing the CVR. We've got good data, but we don't have impact. The recording stops just before the crash.
Well, if the recording stopped, that means the plane must have lost power.
Looks like it. And it supports a dual-engine flameout.
Having the CVR stop about 2 minutes prior to impact is another indication that we lost both engines, because we likely had a rollback of both engines and therefore a change in electrical configuration.
When you're ready.
Investigators listen to the cockpit voice recording, or CVR, to determine why the engines flamed out, even though the plane still had plenty of fuel.
How's the paperwork?
Almost done. Okay.
You know what?
I'm just gonna balance out the fuel here.
The captain wanted to balance his fuel tanks, but he didn't remember that at his interview. That must be when he opened the cross feed valves at 12:17 a.m.
Question is, did he forget to close them?
Let's find out.
Okay, 10 degrees left to Cincinnati when able. 185, thank you.
Already had it.
Right on the money.
The team pays close attention to any mention of the cross-feed valves being closed.
The captain doesn't indicate that he's stopping the crossfeed or even mention it. It made me wonder if they had forgotten that the cross-feeding operation was going on.
Then, just minutes before the flight's scheduled arrival,
AC pump is on, green light. Boost pump's on.
Man, I'm telling you, what is wrong with this plane? It is really funny.
Yeah.
Can you feel it? Feels like it's swinging back and forth.
Yeah. We've got an imbalance on this darn crossfeed I left open.
the captain finally realizes he forgot to stop cross-feeding fuel from the left tank.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. I see.
The crossfeed's been going on for almost half an hour.
Looks like he never shut the crossfeed valves.
He forgot to close it. That explains why the plane was so hard to handle.
With the crossfeed valves open for 29 minutes, only the left fuel tank fed both engines. As the tank emptied, it created an imbalance which made it difficult to control the aircraft.
That also explains why the left tank was empty.
Yeah, but if there was still 5,600 pounds of fuel in the right tank, why didn't that fuel feed the engines? Do you have the list? Thanks.
All right, let's figure this out.
Did the pilots of Air Tahoma Flight 185 follow the correct procedure for balancing their fuel?
The question that I raised for me in the investigation is, if there's ample fuel in the right tank, why did both engines fail?
All right. To cross-feed fuel from the left tank to both engines, first the crew has to open the cross-feed valves here and here.
Investigators consult the wreckage inventory.
And we know from the wreckage, the crew did the first step correctly. The valves are open.
Second, they're supposed to close the right fuel pump here.
Got it. It was turned off at the time of the crash.
Step 3, they were supposed to close the right fuel tank shutoff valve here.
Looks like the right one was left open.
They didn't shut the valve.
So they did the procedure incorrectly.
So the question we had was, by leaving the right fuel tank valve open, did that somehow lead to the engine failure?
I know they made a mistake, but I'm still confused. If they didn't close the valve, why wasn't fuel flowing from the right tank all the way to both engines? And why would the engines flame out?
There's only one way to find out.
As the investigation progressed, we decided to run a test to determine what occurred during the accident flight.
Investigators build a replica of Flight 185's fuel system to better understand how both engines could have failed.
Let's simulate what the captain did. Step 1, open the cross-feed valves.
Cross-feed valves open.
All right, step 2, turn off the right fuel pump.
Right fuel pump off.
Step 3, he didn't close the right fuel tank shutoff valve.
So we've got this in the open position.
Let's see what happens.
Okay. Looks like the left fuel pump is sending fuel from the left tank to both engines. So that part's working out just fine.
Yeah, but fuel from the left fuel tank is also flowing to the right tank.
With the right shutoff valve open, the left pump supplied fuel not only to both engines, but also to the right fuel tank.
Look how quickly the left tank emptied.
This was new to me. I had never seen a case where fuel was transferred to the point of the one tank being emptied.
So the left tank ran dry, and with that pump still running, that means that air was likely being pumped through the whole system.
Investigators now understand why the plane's engines flamed out just before the crash. Once the left tank was empty, air was pumped into the fuel system, causing both engines to flame out.
Turbine engines require a steady flow of fuel. When you start entering air into the system, the air bubbles then cause the interruption of the ignition of the fuel, and that will cause the engines to roll back and to stop.
So if the captain had just followed procedure and shut off that valve?
If he had, there would have been enough fuel in the left tank to power both engines to the airport.
I'm just gonna balance out the fuel here.
The captain's failure to close the right fuel tank shutoff valve sealed their fate.
So why didn't you follow procedure?
As the investigation progressed and new information came to light, it was helpful to go back to the captain to discuss his recall of what happened.
In your airline's handbook, they instruct pilots to shut the right tank valve during the cross-feed procedure. You didn't shut the valve.
I don't remember doing a cross-feed on the day. But typically, when I do the procedure, I leave the tank valve open.
Really?
This was a surprise because that is totally contrary to the flight operating manual.
I heard if you shut that valve, it might fail. Then you have no access to your fuel.
So you've heard the valve is faulty?
I sure have. And my old employer allowed me to do it this way.
Previous employers had told him it was the captain's discretion whether he closes the shutoff valve or not. And we confirmed that that was their position.
Was there a history of fuel tank shutoff valves failing?
I've gone through the FAA service difficulty reports database and I found nothing.
I can't find anything either.
I don't think that valve has ever failed.
There was no evidence of the valve getting stuck. This was a fiction that had somehow spread among the pilot community that simply did not have an accurate basis.
This is the part I don't get. So what were they doing for 29 minutes?
29 minutes is a long time to miss that there's a cross-feed problem, especially when the first officer reports that there are handling difficulties as well. And so it was very important to look into what might have caused this.
Keep it steady.
All right. Captain started the crossfeed at 12:17 a.m. He didn't notice the mistake until 29 minutes later. What happened in between?
Investigators returned to Flight 185 CVR to determine why the pilots didn't notice that there was a growing fuel imbalance.
Looks like the captain finished his paperwork at 12:26 a.m., but he kept talking about it.
All this time I couldn't figure out why on the landing I was out, and I was okay on the takeoff. And it was my chicken scratch. Yeah. The momentum is 1667, but I thought my chicken scratch I put 1067. Couldn't work it out. It was my own doing.
Oh, damn.
I had it all along. We were okay all along.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Okay, first he's distracted by his paperwork, and then he keeps talking about it.
Yeah, the captain's focus is on his paperwork for a while, instead of monitoring the flight.
What about after that? Any mention of the fuel gauges? What about the first officer? How come he didn't pick up on this?
20 minutes after the crossfeed was open, the first officer knew something was wrong.
Yoke feels funny.
Say again?
Feels like I need a lot of force. It's pushing to the right for some reason. I don't know why. I'm trying to... I'm not sure what's going on.
All right, the first officer reports a problem with the flight controls, but he doesn't check his fuel gauges for an imbalance. Why?
Well, according to his work record, he was still pretty new at flying the plane. Plus, he'd only been with the airline 3 months.
To his credit, he was assertive that he was having difficulty in the handling characteristics. So he was completely appropriate in asking for help. And unfortunately, the captain did not respond as a pilot in command would be expected.
Feels like I need a lot of force.
Toma 185, fly heading 090, maintain 4,000.
090, 4000, 185, thank you. 090, 4000.
How many times did he alert the captain to the problem?
He repeated his concerns at least 7 times. Finally, the captain replied.
We'll do a full control check on the ground then.
He missed the cues from his co-pilot.
How long has he been a captain?
Here's the thing. He's been in a cockpit for over 20 years, but only 100 hours or so as a captain.
As captain, we would expect him to actually help the first officer troubleshoot why the aircraft was flying in a non-normal state.
Still, wouldn't they have caught this mistake during the in-range checklist?
That's a good point.
The purpose of the in-range checklist is to prepare the airplane for landing, and that includes a review of the cockpit instruments, including the fuel gauges.
So did they perform the in-range checklist?
Yep. They started the checklist at 12:45 a.m.
I'll give you the in-range. AC pump is on, green light. Fuel panel. Boost pump's on.
Man, I'm telling you, what is wrong with this plane? It is really funny.
Yeah. We have an imbalance in this darn crossfeed I left open.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. I see.
Yeah.
We're gonna flame out if we don't, aren't we?
Ten seconds later, the engines flamed out.
Wow. The plane had become one gigantic glider about to hit the ground.
They were too late to save it.
They found out about the crossfeed issue at the same time they lost their engines.
Did they start the checklist too late?
They were at about 3,000 feet when they started.
According to the airline's operating manual, they should have started the checklist at 12,000 feet.
They should have started at least 10 minutes earlier.
If they had, they would have caught their mistake with enough time to save the plane.
If you're not monitoring the fuel gauges, when you run the in-range checklist, that'll remind you, but they waited until it was so late, they didn't have time to prevent the engines from flaming out.
But it still bugs me. Even with all the distractions and the inexperience, all professional pilots are trained to scan their instruments. Why didn't they?
Maybe the fuel gauges are hard to see.
Could the pilots actually see the fuel gauges from the seating positions that they were at?
All right. So both our seats are fully forward.
Investigators now visit a Convair 580 cockpit to determine if its layout somehow prevented the pilots from monitoring their fuel gauges.
So both fuel gauges are visible.
But is that the case for every seat position?
Let's make an adjustment. Wow. From this angle, the fuel gauges are much harder to see. The throttle control console is in the way. Jesus.
It depended on what position the seat was in. When the seat was aft, it was more difficult to see the fuel gauges.
So the degree to which the fuel gauges are obscured changes depending on the seat position. It's hard to say if it played a role.
Unfortunately, because of the destruction of the aircraft, the wreckage did not allow us to determine whether the captain's seat was forward or aft.
What in the world is going on with this plane? Sucker's acting so funny.
In this case, there was a concern about the fuel gauges and their location and whether they could be seen by the pilots.
Yes, he would have to rise up just a little bit and look over the thrust levers to be able to see the gauges, but it's your job to know what those instruments are saying at all times.
I've been told some pilots put this sign up during a crossfeed as a reminder.
Investigators have pieced together what led to the crash of Flight 185.
You know what? I'm just gonna balance out the fuel here.
When the captain decides to even out the fuel in the tanks, he skips a key step in the procedure and leaves the right fuel tank shutoff valve open.
If the captain had shut the right fuel tank valve, there may have been enough fuel to complete the flight.
It's my chicken scratch. I had it all along.
Then he forgets to close the crossfeed valves.
It was my own doing. Oh, man.
There are priorities when you're flying, and you don't want to be distracted by something like doing paperwork that's overdue.
Yoke feels funny.
As fuel drained out of the left fuel tank,
Say again?
Feels like I need a lot of force.
the plane became unbalanced.
It's pushing to the right for some reason. I don't know why.
When you have a flight control problem, that's an urgent problem. You have to deal with it immediately.
Runway's in sight.
I'll give you the in-range.
Then the pilot started the in-range checklist later than required.
Yeah. We've got an imbalance on that darn crossfeed I left open.
When the captain finally realized there was a fuel problem, it was too late.
Fuel is life in an airplane. You have no more fuel, there's only one way you're gonna go, and it's down.
Keep it steady.
I think the lesson to be learned is that regardless of the airplane that you're flying and the conditions, that you should adhere to the procedures as they're provided to you.
In its report on Flight 185, the NTSB makes a recommendation to all Convair 580 operators.
One of the main recommendations was to inform pilots that they should shut off the fuel shutoff valves if they are cross-feeding. Ultimately, if flight crews follow the procedures that they are given, they will get on the ground safely.